Now that we're good and deaf, I don't know why that intro plays so loud. I hope it's not as jarring on your end as it is through the headphones, the volume, whatever. Anyway, good to be back. Episode 97. 3 more away from the 100th show. Pretty excited about that. Still working on some details. Hopefully have a guest on for that one. Anyway, Michael, say hello.
Hey, glad to be here as usual. Glad to have y'all with us. Hope this finds you well. We've got a lot of good information for you today. There's always a lot going on in the world, and there's always a way to tie it biblically all together. As the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun. We're just kind of rinse, lather, repeat.
Rinse, lather, repeat. I like that. And that is what we do every week. And so, as we all know, it was Wednesday morning, the plane crash. And it was a Black Hawk, and was it a Boeing?
Yeah, commercial airliner.
So immediately the media took no time. They didn't waste any time. They didn't let any dust settle on their feet, trying to pull out a statement that they said Trump made that he didn't make. And I've known people that have worked in Sky Towers. Sky Towers are, you have to be absolutely perfect. They don't even allow people with dyslexia to work in a Sky Tower.
Well, I mean, if you get the coordinates backwards or read something wrong, it would have a disastrous effect. I mean, there's a good reason for that. What I would be interested in is, obviously, that's a busy airport. How many planes do they have coming in and out regularly? You know, like how many are they trying to coordinate at once?
So, I mean, just a few of the things that air traffic controllers have shorter lifespans due to stress. Donald Trump makes that claim. That is not a false claim. He has changed the hiring standards after taking over for Obama. I mean, this was one of the reasons why DEI had to go, because it isn't about racism as much as it's about we can't hire people for certain jobs just because we feel sorry for them. Or we feel like that part of the reason that our country's in the shape that it's in is because we've had people on the left continuously pulling at the heartstrings. And this is a perfect example of why you have to have people in locations that are equipped to do the job, are able to do the job without any inhibitions whatsoever. I mean, when they want to say, well, all men are created equal, we are up to a certain point. You know what I'm saying? If you're not Tom Brady, then you get the Kansas City Chiefs refs cheating for you. Like, I'm joking. That's a joke, but probably a misplaced joke. But not all people are created equal.
No, it's equal opportunity, but not equal outcome. And we're not everyone is Einstein.
Yeah.
Not everyone is Michael Jordan. I mean, we're all given a gift, some more so than others, and everyone's gifts in a different area. Okay, let's use a different example. You're being held hostage, and someone has a gun to your head. Do you want the guy that can shoot a quarter at 100 yards to take the shot to save you? Or do you want the guy who might hit you instead, just because we need more of a particular race or ethnicity or sex? I want the guy who's the best for the job, regardless of who that is or what they look like. And I'm sure how many people died? I know it was quite a few.
It was like over 300, wasn't it?
Yeah, the several hundred people that died would much rather have someone who is capable and aware, and so would their families. Ultimately, that is the price you pay for putting people in positions where they're not qualified.
So Trump says, I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. Mr. Trump said the FAA's website states that they, including hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and this is the one I'm not sure why, but dwarfism. Can they not see over the bar to see?
That might be a legit concern.
I wonder.
Well, I mean, you get someone who's maybe 4 feet tall. I mean, that's maybe to my abdomen.
Yeah.
Or like my chest.
And some of those jobs you actually have to stand for.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I can imagine because maybe in some of those situations you're not going to have time to get up and move.
Well, it's not exactly the same scenario, but it's like trying to reach something on the top shelf at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it pays to have a little height.
I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at anybody's disability. I just, the fact it says, a dwarf cannot. I mean, look, what that goes to show you is that, look, there are some things, and life in itself will eventually pan itself out. And you're told all your life you can be anything you want to be. Well, that's simply not the truth. You can be whatever your abilities allow you to be, and you can be great at what your abilities allow you to be. You can exceed above and beyond what everyone else around you is, but that doesn't mean you can just go out and be whatever you want to be.
No, I mean, there are certain jobs like pilot, astronaut, nuclear physicist. You have to have a very specific set of skills, and you have to have the intelligence and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And we're not all on an equal playing field.
Right.
I mean, some people are just smarter than others. There's no way around it. Doesn't mean that those people who are not are incapable. They just have to find a different way to utilize what they do have. Einstein was theorizing stuff, close to, look at it, close to 100 years ago, or 100 years ago, that people are just now proving.
Right.
Like, there are some people who rise far above the average.
Yeah.
And we can't all be like that.
Right.
Like, it's that good old bell curve. You got people on the low end, a lot of people in the middle, and some people on the top end. It's the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah, it's like, we can use even in this industry, podcasting. Of course, Rush Limbaugh was not a podcaster. Rush Limbaugh was a radio talk show host. that nobody's been able to do better than he did at, even still to this day. But if you want to look at who the potential, I guess, rival to that within the podcast world would be Joe Rogan. But Joe Rogan cannot even do what Rush Limbaugh did.
No.
Rogan has to have guests. Rush did 3 hours without guests. So it shows you, I mean, they're just, it just depends on, I mean, who are you and how you do it. But certainly be the best at whatever you can be and you can succeed. But DEI is placing people into positions just because that it's really starts to make you get concerned if you've got to go to the doctor for something serious. Because is the person qualified?
Well, I brought it up before, but I used to love to use statistics when people say, well, the police just go around and kill people. On an average year, the police across this country kill, on average, 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
How many do doctors kill through medical malpractice?
Well, and also, too, the police kill more white people than they do any other
but that's a conveniently forgotten statistic.
That's right.
But going back to medical malpractice, anyone who's listening, Google it. If you don't believe the numbers, the low end estimate is over 250,000.
Mm-hmm.
The higher end is 400,000 or more.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking 250,000 people die every year from going to the doctor. Do you really want the guy or girl or whatever demographic they're trying to fill in who is at the bottom of the class to be diagnosing your rare cancer or, something that really requires a lot of expertise?
Well, I listened to a podcast, I guess about a year ago or so, maybe a couple years ago, and I heard this guy on there, and it was talking about DEI then, and he was referring to how that you've got to hire so many women or so many minorities for every white person you hire, and he was helping a professor at some university, and it was specifically for engineers. And he said this girl had taken a test that was specific. It was a math test specific for the engineering degree. I think he was a construction engineer, I believe. Mechanical, I believe is what he said. Maybe the same, I don't know. But anyway, he said that she turned the test in and he graded it because that was what the professor had him doing, was grading tests, and said she failed it. And he takes it up there, and after class, his professor says, I need you to stay over. I need to talk to you, talking to him, and said, you can't fail her. He said, well, why not? She failed. He said, doesn't matter. We've got to produce a certain percentage ratio for every white male that we pass, or every male. He said, she's going to be an engineer building stuff. Don't we want people who know what they're doing? He said, well, of course, but you still got to pass her. And he said, that's what made me decide to change my career. Because he said, I didn't want to be a part of something that I knew there were people out there working who did not legitimately pass.
Yeah, so they'll end up building the stadium you're in that collapses, or the bridge that fails.
Which I think in some things like that, eventually it's going to weed itself out, because I know I happen to know this engineer. I won't say what style of engineer he is, nor would I say his name. But I personally know this engineer. And he had told me one time that very same thing had gotten him in trouble with the company he worked for, because he said there was this guy and this girl that actually it was kind of a reverse thing. He wanted to hire the girl. He said she was a far better engineer. And they wanted to hire this other guy, I think really more out of nepotism or just, good old boy kind of thing. And he told him, said, no, you need to hire her. She knows what she's doing. And sure enough, they hired the guy. And I was living in the state when this happened. Something occurred, and it created a lot of problems for the town. And this is how I found out that this whole conversation had taken place, because it was really bad. And he told me, he said, I told him, do not hire this guy, hire her. and said, sure enough, he said, the problem was a mistake that he had made due to his lack of understanding of how to do the job. And he said, then I'm the person who was sent out there to go correct it. And he said, I told the person who owned the company, I told you so. Obviously that didn't set well, but I mean, you can see the frustration when you know that there is some kind of agenda attached to why certain people are put into certain positions.
Oh yeah. Well, I won't get into specifics, but I've seen this firsthand where in my previous profession, where someone based on their race and their sex was afforded opportunities to retain employment, where had you been a white male, you would have been immediately fired. There were statements made and mistakes made repeatedly that would have opened the door for termination for someone else. But I think a lot of times now, places are worried about lawsuits and their public image more than they're concerned about the quality of the employee. It's a scary situation because you've got people in lots of areas that are not well qualified. And, like I said, would you want them doing your brain surgery? Something that requires an immense amount of skill and dedication. There's too many areas in life where a mistake will cost you life or limb.
And as we saw earlier this week, that was one of those mistakes. You've got a situation there where the question had went out, can you see the plane? Well, first off, why was that question asked? Whoever was in the control tower should have given a non-clearance to take off.
Well, they should know the elevation at which the aircraft is operating.
Yeah.
The direction of travel. Mm-hmm. Like, those planes have transponders on them that's feeding out the data to the tower. I want to know why they were operating in the same area at the same elevation.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many...
One's military, the other was civilian.
Yeah, there's so many unanswered questions. But and how close to the airfield did it occur? There's a lot of things.
Can't imagine there's a lot of... there's going to be some communication, but I can't imagine there's just a whole lot of communication between military aircraft and civilian aircraft.
Probably not. But they do have the ability to do so.
Yeah.
Just like when you have an aircraft that's not responding and they scramble fighters, the fighter jets are able to communicate with them. They have, I guess for a lack of a better term, common channels where they can communicate. But there's too many variables. But, given what I know just from, common sense, this shouldn't have occurred.
No.
Helicopters operate at a much lower altitude than passenger jets. That's why I said I'm really curious how close to the airstrip it occurred.
Well, I think unless it is military or it's medical, you're not going to get too many helicopters in the sky anyway. Not at night.
No. And I don't know. We'll have to wait until more data is available to really render a valid opinion. But once again, what's a military helicopter doing over a civilian?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot of.
You think there would be a base or somewhere that would be taken off from?
There's a lot of questions that are left to be answered.
Because if they weren't. I think they were near Reagan Airport, International Airport. So I mean, why that helicopter was there? Of course, I get it. Granted, it's the capital, but that helicopter would typically be grounded somewhere near a military base.
You would think. I mean, it's not, especially in areas like that, it's probably not unheard of. But why would you have military aircraft operating at a civilian airport? I don't know. Like I said, without more data, which we may never get.
I don't know. With this president, I bet we can get more than, because they've already released what all those drones were up in the air for.
Yeah, well, I would sooner see Trump releasing it. If it were anyone else, it'd get buried. And, 75 years from now, you might get a glimpse at what they didn't redact.
After we're all dead and gone.
Yeah.
So the next question. This is Newsweek. So Trump's approval rating has fallen in his first week from 56% on January 23rd to 52% on January 28th. Now, that's not uncommon. Barack Obama dropped from, I think it was 67% to 60% in his first week. It's typical for a president to drop in the first week. But what they're wanting to make the big deal about is his deportation of illegal immigrants and then releasing the January 6ers. I'm wondering how much of those numbers are skewed.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of you cannot trust big media. Mm-mm. They have their own agenda. So people get really hung up about this this whole deportation. They're getting rid of hardened criminals, people who are convicted felons, rapists, murderers.
Yeah.
They're deporting them at the moment. Do you really want those people in your community? It doesn't make sense. And the fact that they're illegal means they entered the country illegally.
Yeah.
They've broken the law. I am not concerned about the guy who is cooking at a restaurant, who stays out of trouble. I don't want the gang members, the drug dealers, and like I said, the rapists and murderers here. Get them out. They will bring nothing of value to your community. Mm-hmm. And in fact, if anything, you'll end up suffering the consequence. And then the January 6ers, they did not pardon anyone who had been convicted of violence. Okay, so you simply set foot in, and let's face it, they were all let in. There was no mass rush. They didn't bring weapons. If they really wanted to cause an insurrection, I mean, think about it. If the 1,000 people had body armor and AR-15s, they could have taken over. But it was simply people who were unarmed. Most of it was simple trespassing. A lot of those charges were absolutely trumped up, and it was for a political purpose. They were being prosecuted more extensively simply for their political standing.
And so another one that has just come out too is that federal employees were told to remove pronouns from their email signatures by end of day Friday, which would have been yesterday, according to internal memos obtained by ABC News. Again, take that for what it's worth. It's ABC News. But he did say in his inaugural that there was only going to be 2 genders. Some people are saying, I don't know why they're getting all worked up about this. One person said he's taking free out of freedom.
He's taking the lunacy out of society.
Yeah.
You know, the whole, there's a myriad of genders and it's a scale. And
Yeah.
no, it really isn't. You either have an innie or an outie.
Yeah.
There's very few cases where someone may have, like in cases of hermaphrodites,
Yeah.
where that could potentially be questionable, but there's not 87 different genders.
No.
Like, it's simply an illusion that people want to make real.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the whole thing of, well, I identify as, well, I can't help what you identify as. It's what your birth record says. That's what you are. And so it creates more chaos. It does not, there's nothing efficient about allowing that.
Giving in to delusion only makes the delusion deeper.
Yeah.
And then it creates this spiral where people, I mean, it's like going down the rabbit hole. This whole gender fluid, or the people who are like, I'm a girl today and I'm a boy tomorrow. Like, no, that what we have done is, I'll flat out say it. We've given in to mental illness, and instead of trying to help, we've coddled that, and we have promoted it as a society, and as a result, we have people who live in an absolute fantasy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. When you look at how much the left and people on the left are losing their minds over the deportation of illegals, the January 6ers being released, people having to, DEI being gone. That may not seem significant, but what it actually does is it shows you just how lawless the Democratic Party and the left have gotten to. That people feel like that. There's some kind of persecution going on.
Well, the fact that they were okay with the rioters and Antifa and BLM walking free after doing billions and billions of dollars in damages, people dying. The fact that they were okay with them not being prosecuted, but then you have people who a majority were peaceful, that were not doing nothing more than, if you wanted to say, they were trespassing. The fact that they want them crucified, they want them going to prison for. The double standard is so blatant.
Well, when they found him guilty of those felonies, all that was to give their side talking points.
Well, and they trumped up the charges literally. They took misdemeanors, charged them as felonies, and they were outside of the statute of limitations. Yeah. Like, the fact that comes off to some people as justice is terrifying.
Yeah.
We'll take something you did 30 years ago.
And I think every one of those felonies were outside of the statute of limitation, were they not?
Yes. So Thomas, you jaywalked 10 years ago. You're going to prison. Like, do what? Like,
Well, I have a friend. Well, actually, and I don't think he. Well, I won't say who it is because I didn't get permission from it. But he was he was in university. He was at a university studying for his graduate degree, and one day the police show up and arrest this guy that's in the dorm with him, and it was because like 10 or 12 years ago he had rear-ended this car ahead of him, and so 12 years later, this woman dies, and her kids and grandkids press charges saying that her death was a result of him rear-ending her 12 years prior.
Good grief.
And he ended up, he got arrested. He had to go to court. He had to get a lawyer. I think eventually there was some common sense that won out. But he ended up, I think, having to drop out of college for 1 or 2 semesters due to it.
I mean, it's insanity. I have heard it phrased quite a few times as two-tiered justice system, and it's really true. With the previous administration, there was no hiding the fact that they were prosecuting what they perceived as political enemies. They were not abiding by the letter of the law or the spirit of the law. They were doing it out of spite.
Explain something to us, though. You're a police officer, former police officer. What do you say when they say, well, if he committed the crime, justice has no time limit, so how could they be out of the how could the felonies have been out of?
Well, first of all, they weren't felonies. There are certain crimes that have obviously a statute of limitations. So depending on the severity, there is an amount of time where you can seek prosecution. If it falls outside of that, then it's essentially as if it never happened. That you move on. There are certain crimes where there is no limit. Murder, rape, there are certain serious crimes that you could have done it 50 years ago, and that's irrelevant. Like, you will still be brought to justice. But, you hit somebody's mailbox, which in Arkansas is, like, say you hit their mailbox and you left. Didn't give them your insurance, didn't pay for it. It's leaving the scene of an accident with property damage only, which is a misdemeanor. And then it's likely, criminal mischief, misdemeanor. But it would be like coming back 20 years later and wanting to arrest them for it. Like that's long gone.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and it goes to, if you go back and you read or you ever watch the movies Walking Tall, Buford Pusser, when he was running, he said at his court trial, or at a court trial, and then ultimately when he decided to run for sheriff, he said, if they did it to me, then that means they can do it to any one of you. Of course, I keep that PG. He says he added a few expletives.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. If they can do that to the former president, who is now the sitting president of the United States, they can do that to any one of us. And that is why, yes, it should scare you. I don't care who you are. I mean, I told someone the other day, they were talking about it, about his felonies, and I said, I said, Biden took a shower with his granddaughter. So what's your point? I mean, if they're not going to arrest this man, and it is in her diary that he did so, why are you wanting to try a man for crimes that had a statute of limitation on it?
Well,
and then slap felony on it.
A lot of the crimes with which they were trying to charge him were also victimless.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, it went well beyond the bounds of justice.
Yeah.
It was simply, they were looking for a way to keep him from being president.
Well, because none of the crimes they tried him on were Russian collusion or anything while he was sitting in. They didn't even try him on January 6th. That's not even one they brought up.
No, they were trying to get him on real estate. And like I said, the whole thing, if you go and actually examine it, it was all a farce.
Yeah.
You know, the craziest thing is look this up. The two FBI agents that started the whole Russia collusion hoax were having an affair, and they were texting each other on their FBI issued phones, talking about how can we keep Trump from being president. They colluded to create this whole scenario, and then they had the audacity. So the FBI gets all their texts from their FBI issued phones. They end up making it public. They sued the FBI and got like $1.5 million.
Yeah.
You know, like what kind of upside down Looney Tunes world are we living in? Where you can blatantly conspire, break the law, and then sue and get $1 million.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to you remember back in the 90s that one kid, him and some friends got felonies because they were driving by with baseball bats and knocking mailboxes down. But that was because it was deliberate damage versus somebody running off the road and hitting a mailbox, and then they just keep driving.
Yeah, well, that's why you have criminal mischief first and criminal mischief second. So second is you damaged the property, but there wasn't intent. Like, you still have to pay to get it fixed.
Yeah. But you're probably not going to get handcuffed perp walk.
Well, criminal mischief in the first is you intentionally destroyed the property of another. And you also have to look at the monetary value.
Yeah.
So if you continuously destroy property, once you have surpassed $1,000, it becomes a felony.
Yeah.
You know, if it's under 1,000, then it's a misdemeanor. But, you know, how many mailboxes do you have to destroy before you, especially in today's age?
Yeah.
Before you're looking at $1,000, it's really not that.
Well, that's kind of like I get, people talk about going to all these department stores and stealing, and they're keeping it under a certain amount of money, and I'm going, okay, but you do realize they're viewing security footage from all the stores you're stealing, and they're adding the charges up like that.
Yeah, well,
there's a reason, right? It all goes to a mainframe.
Yeah, people are just they're not rational. If that's how you view the world and you think that that is an appropriate action, you already are not thinking clearly.
Yeah.
And it's like fraudulent use of a credit card. I don't remember. I think it's within the preceding 6 months, it's all the charges. So if you only do $10 here, but you do it 100 times, you got a felony. They think, well, if I keep the amount small, but it's all run together, within a certain time frame, it's either 6 months or a year. I'll be honest, I haven't looked at that.
So let's just say it's a year. After that year, it goes away.
Well, no. Then you would start a new running total, like, well, hopefully you've caught them by then. But, like I had a case when I was in CID. Woman had her credit card stolen, and the girl or suspect used it at a gas station and then a restaurant, and then a liquor store. Like, yes, they were all separate charges, but they all get condensed or added together to get the total. But you can only do that for a certain time period. So you could have separate charges, but for each 6-month period or a year or whatever. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. But that kind of going back though, I mean, it's apparent that they're just deliberately going to look for whatever they can find with this guy. And,
And if they can't find it, they'll make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's just where, common sense has not really been the top of the list over the last several years.
Well,
I'm not just talking the last 4, but I mean the last several.
You can tell this better than I. Who was the guy that said when they came after the communist, I didn't worry because I wasn't a communist?
It was the German philosopher. What was his name?
I know you had told it before, but what should concern people is when they come after someone for something frivolous that could be you, and going, well, I wasn't this or I wasn't that, or I don't affiliate with that political party. That's irrelevant. If they are blatantly violating people's rights, they're charging things that have extended beyond the statute of limitations.
Martin and Mueller.
Yeah. They will eventually come for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's it was a poem that he wrote by Martin and Mueller, and it's actually inscribed on his tombstone. They came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up.
I mean, that's... If you allow...
Well, was it Martin Luther King Jr. who said inaction is action?
Yeah. If you allow the perversion of the law and you allow the law to be manipulated for certain people to be charged, you're opening Pandora's box, and eventually you will face the same fate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If you look at how people on the far left have turned against each other for their quote-unquote lack of action or whatever, there's always some egregious charge that they throw out. But you will eventually find yourself on the wrong end.
Yeah.
It's just like with Stalin. Stalin was so paranoid that he killed most of his competent generals because he was afraid of a military coup. Eventually, you think you're at the top, but eventually someone will come for you.
Yeah. Well, you're not safe if you don't, if you are not willing to defend, then you're going to lose whatever it is you have. You have to be willing to stand up for it. You have to be willing to fight for it, maybe even die for it. And that is, as you said, the scary thing is that they were able to prosecute him and find him guilty on crimes that had a statute of, what's the word? Limitation on it. That's why that when I read that his approval ratings had dropped, I was going, I kind of take this with a grain, because if people are departing from him based on what he told them throughout the entire campaign that he was going to do, then they weren't listening.
Yeah. Well, I also don't trust the validity or reliability of polls done by like
Yeah.
ABC or
Yeah.
who are they polling and what is their political bias. I wish that there were more institutions that did these polls that had no affiliation,
Yeah.
that simply looked for, or like back in the day, reporting where they simply said, here's what occurred, and didn't politicize it. They left it to you to decide your stance. You know, like everything now has become so overtly political. You know, the rain only falls on this side of the town. It's got to be because
Yeah.
the rich Republicans are some completely asinine, ridiculous claim, but everything has become politicized. They can't simply give you the information and rely on you to be intelligent enough to interpret it and form your own opinion.
That goes back to the Woodrow Wilson administration, the administrative state. Woodrow Wilson's administration believed that the American people were not smart enough to understand and figure out complicated diplomacy.
Well, they've done a good job through our educational system and putting fluoride in the water.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and people used to laugh about that, like, oh, what a crazy conspiracy. Turns out it's true.
Yeah, and that, I mean, look at the beratement that RFK is going through right now.
Well, look at the chemicals and the other things they allow in food here that they do not, that are outlawed or banned in Europe and other countries. And you'll realize that they really don't care about you. They have no interest in seeing your life preserved.
Right.
The fact that we use dyes that are known to cause cancer and they put them in medicine, and then you have 3 years to remove it. Like, why can't you start doing that now? Like, why does it have to have a color?
Yeah.
Okay, your cough syrup won't be red. Whoop-dee. I'm sure that the color doesn't affect the taste. It'll still taste terrible.
Yeah.
Like, what? It's insane. And the fact that we put it in cereal and candy, all the things that are targeted at children. I mean, you have to look at it and start to go, well, maybe that's not an accident.
Yeah.
It's on purpose. They're making you sick. They're making you dumb and keeping you subjected.
Yeah.
Use your brain. Think outside the box. Try to eat stuff that is not fake.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, Europe makes them put on the box the potential downside to eating such foods with those chemicals in them.
Well, the fact that you get cereal here and they'll have, 25 different chemicals, and then you go to Europe and it's like 3. Yes, their cereal is not as sweet, it's not as vibrantly colored, but ultimately, is it worth your health? We wonder why obesity, cancer, all these other things are so rampant. If you're exposing yourself to carcinogens over and over, you're putting them in your body. I mean, it's not rocket science. That is the result. And the fact that people are not as concerned about that is terrifying. Like, you're okay with them feeding you literally feeding you poison. Like, how is that okay?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think there's just a lot of stuff that's been going on that we have allowed them to slowly boil us, if you will, like the frog, into believing and accepting that it's okay. And I look at what took place over the last 4 years, and there's many people on the political left that are completely okay with it. And I'm going, well, just as quickly as that can happen to your political opponents, it can happen to you too.
Oh, yeah.
And it will.
Undoubtedly. And the fact that they've turned on RFK, who has been a lifelong Democrat, and if you look at a lot of the policies that he promotes, he's a more moderate Democrat, but he really, he's still the same guy. They've just gone so far off. They've left the moderate or kind of middle-leaning Democrats, in the dust. A large bulk of the head of the Democratic Party has literally gone off the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, that's why that you've got Tulsi Gabbard now, who is going to be, looks like, confirmed to what did she get? Intelligence, I think. And then you got RFK. They have realized a long time ago that the Democrats are not what that. I say they are the party they've always been, but they've just shown their true colors.
Yeah, exactly. It's become more and more apparent. And the fact that they simply don't value anyone who doesn't meet or accept their standard. But, like Elon Musk, Elon's mother, once they really saw the inner workings and how quickly the party will turn on you, they left. And some of the absolute blatant cheating and the absolute lack of rule of law, because Elon's mother talked about when she went to vote how you didn't have to show an ID. Like you're voting and there's absolutely no reason you couldn't go to 7 different polling sites.
Yeah.
And just vote over and over again. Once she saw the corruption from the inside,
Yeah.
She realized, oh, well, I've been wrong all along. They don't hide it anymore. It's out in the open.
Well, and the Republicans have been guilty of stealing elections too. They did. It was under, was it Taft they stole it from? I'm trying to remember if it was, I can't remember, but they stole the election. And this was back in the 1800s. And the person they put in there was just a horrible president. And then the Democrats came back in 4 years, and it was very much a similar situation that we just experienced. I mean, when the American people wise up to, hey, we've been duped, and they did this with Woodrow Wilson, they kicked his administration out, and they replaced it with Calvin Coolidge's. And they replaced the House and the Senate with Republicans. When the American people finally wake up to we've been duped, there's typically a lot of political consequences that are paid. The unfortunate thing is not a lot of administrations retract what the former administrations had put into place.
No, they just build on it. It's just like the Patriot Act was for something 24 years ago, and we never repealed it. In fact, we just kept it alive and
same thing. Well, the FBI, the DEA, the all of the alphabet stew club, they were in there for a good reason at the time, but they're still there,
and they've grown exponentially.
Yeah,
it's like I said,
One thing Trump said in his that he's been saying that instead of getting rid of the IRS, he's going to add the ERS, the External Revenue Service. And I'm like, why are you adding another branch? Why are you expanding it?
Yeah, so the way I view government is the same way I view the storage on my phone. Okay, my kids are allowed to download a game of their choosing on my phone, but if they want a new game, the old one has to go.
Yeah.
You don't just keep compiling them.
Right.
You have to choose, and what is more important, in this case, in the government, what serves a better purpose. By adding new, agencies, all you're doing is adding to the overhead.
Yeah.
Someone has to be employed. They collect the paycheck. If you're going to add something, eliminate something.
Yeah. And let's get rid of the IRS. I mean, because, okay, fine, you're going to get the ERS. In these 4 years, they may work great, but we don't know who's going into office in the next 4 years. And how are they going to turn that against us?
Well, they'll end up keeping both.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they'll just end up raking in tons of cash for the government, and you won't see a penny.
Yeah.
Like, you have to think about if someone on the opposite end of the spectrum comes after you, how could they abuse this?
Yeah. And they will. I mean, that's what happened with the the Patriot Act. It's what's happened with the
all these FISA warrants and everything.
The FISA warrant, where they've been now they've pretty much said it is constitutional for them to listen to your phone calls. That's another one. I'm going, Trump, what are you going to do about it, man?
Yeah. Well, you talk the talk. Now it's time to walk the walk.
Yeah.
If you are not a suspected criminal or a terrorist or whatever, they have no business monitoring your communication. That goes back to the good old Constitution.
But right there, I've got the question, because my thing is, okay, what is the criteria for them to be able to say you are now a suspected terrorist?
Well, that's something else that would need to be sharply defined, because the way they view things now, if you are a political dissident, you could be a terrorist.
Well, you could be a terrorist, or you may indirectly and unknowingly have some kind of contact with somebody that is a terrorist, and now you are put on that list.
Yeah. Well, it's like the craziness with the no-fly list after 9/11.
Yeah.
Where if you shared a name, or let's say someone had an alias, they could put specifics with it. Let's just say your name was, I don't know, Johnny Appleseed, but there was a terrorist who used that as a cover. Well, they didn't say, well, this one's okay. They just blanketed.
Yeah.
Why was Tulsi Gabbard on the no-fly list?
Yeah.
Like, they need a stringent set of criterion to determine who is a viable threat. But simply saying you don't like something or you disagree does not meet the threshold.
Now, again, I want to say that doesn't mean that I've lost support, or Trump's lost my support as far as the president, because a lot of these laws such as that are, there's so many of them out there that you can only deal with so many, right? Before you just forget that there's those that are out there. But this goes all the way back to the George W. Bush administration, and which I'm no fan of the GW administration at all. He expanded the government huge. I did vote for him.
See, I did too, and I think that he is much more similar to like John Kerry. They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it at the time, But if you look at how chummy all of these former presidents that allegedly had such disdain for each other, if you look at how they act now,
Which does bode the question. We saw Obama and Trump chumming it up at Carter's viewing.
funeral, yeah, I think that to some extent you have to do it to try to stay amicable, because a lot of those people are still quite powerful, but I feel like they're too comfortable with each
Yes.
other. Just like old W and Clinton going places and speaking together.
Yeah, it was like Mike Tyson and Holyfield after the whole ear biting incident, which made more sense for those two. But two former presidents that were complete political rivals, you're going, I'm not sure what you two had in common.
Why are you best friends outside of it? It's because a lot of it is a facade. They are, like I said, they're two sides of the same coin. There is very little ultimately that separates them. They're all the ultra rich elite. Their families have been running things like.
Well, Adams and Jefferson literally hated one another really up until they died. I think it was the last little bit that they lived. Of course, both of them died on the 4th of July the same year, the same day. But they didn't like each other.
No. I feel like a lot of what they do is like professional wrestling.
Yeah.
It's all a show. Deep down, they all meet and they're drinking buddies.
Yeah.
Like a lot of what you see is simply to give or provide the illusion that there is more of a division between certain political parties.
Yeah.
I think they're all in cahoots.
Yeah.
And it's become glaringly apparent, especially the older I've gotten, where I look at what, like George W. Bush did and the outright lie of WMDs, and like it's really discouraging.
Just to get a war started.
Yeah.
And that's all that was. It was to get a war started.
Just to get even for his dad.
Yeah.
It really, the more you examine it now, we're further away now, so it's a little easier to examine it, because at the time they sold everyone a bill of goods.
Well, the euphoria of we had just been attacked in the Twin Towers, and when that happened, Americans wanted revenge.
But we went into a totally different country.
Well, I mean, look, and I know when I say this, Hitler had to be dealt with. He had to be dealt with. But Japan was the country that attacked, not Germany.
Well,
you understand what I'm saying? And what I mean is Hitler had to be dealt with. What was going on had to be dealt with. But that seems to be the American political go-to.
I would say World War II is slightly different in the fact that Japan and Germany had a defense pact where if one was declared war on...
No, that's
then,
true, too. That's true.
Like that was more unavoidable.
Kind of like the Monroe Doctrine that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where,
I mean, that, and that makes sense.
But like Saddam Hussein had very little, if anything, to do with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Like we used all these things as justification.
Well, both of them were CIA plants.
Yeah.
Both of them. Saddam and
Bin Laden.
Bin Laden.
Yeah. And they had been trained by Americans.
Yeah.
That's where, man, you know what's crazy is I watch a lot of these alleged terrorists, and there are certain tells that they have been trained by people from the West. And you watch them and you're like, I guarantee you we had something to do with We do this time and time again.
Military industrial complex.
Yeah.
We were told to not allow it. A president told us, a former general told us, and we still did it.
Yeah, Eisenhower, of all people,
Yeah.
who had just essentially sealed our victory in World War II, was going, hey.
Well, it goes back to, and I can't remember who said it. Person's still alive. The reason that we are no good at doing this is because of our Judeo-Christian. In order to build an empire, you've got to be as ruthless as Rome and Greece and any of those countries were, and we're not. Britain wasn't. You have to be willing to just kill and wipe people off the face of the earth at will. So instead, we use people like Saddam Hussein to do that until we want revenge and want the oil. And then we go completely destabilize the Middle East in doing so.
Yeah, well, what we have a habit of doing as a country is exploiting someone, putting them in power, and once we've used them for whatever we want, we get rid of them.
Yeah.
But, we talk about this or that. We are directly responsible for the creation of ISIS.
Yeah.
We destabilized the region. We took out all the people who kept some semblance of, I don't know what the best word would be, not peace, but they kept things under control. We removed them, and then we created a power vacuum for someone far worse.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've been paying the Taliban, it's just, it's insane. And we're paying them millions of dollars a week,
Yeah.
simply to, I guess, quiet down. But
Yeah.
all they're doing is amassing massive amounts of U.S. currency that ultimately will come back to bite us.
Right.
Just like the absolutely disgraceful withdrawal from Afghanistan, where we left billions of dollars worth of equipment that you now see them parading around with. What? It just blows my mind.
No, it is, and it's you destabilize it, and then you go in and you want to act like that it's the evils, and you're going, well, and that's not against the American people. I mean, the American people don't want it. It's people within power, and that's the reason why that always be careful when your president that you voted for is getting his policies through that you wanted him to get through. Think about, okay, he's probably only going to be my president for 4 to 8 years, and then after that, who is it? And they're going to come in and they can use those policies too, just not in the way you thought they could or would.
Yeah. You have to take a good, hard look at how would someone who is the exact opposite, how would they utilize this? Because we have really, as a country, stopped looking at what's good for Americans. Yeah. It's what's good for my side.
Yeah.
What's good for my side. Yeah. We're too busy fighting over, we're not looking at broad-reaching things that are good for everyone. We're creating these things like they will be exploited. Anything that you create in government will be abused, period. And then you have to look at how will that abuse be perpetrated by the next president or the next administration.
Well, and to kind of wrap things up, I would say this too. I'll repeat myself on this. People say presidents come and go. That's true. Policies and doctrines don't. And every president builds on the former president's policy and doctrine. So Be careful. I mean, Obama said it best. Elections have consequences. Be careful because the very policy you voted for can be used against you.
Absolutely. Especially when there's very little to determine who is a terrorist. Just like when they were holding, they were classifying people as enemy combatants and holding them indefinitely. No trial, no lawyer. How could they use that against you?
Yeah.
Because if they do it to someone else, chances are, if you disagree, it'll come back.
Is there
to
a
you.
law that even says you can indefinitely hold someone for going into the Capitol?
I don't.
I think there is with the place out in New Mexico, the Roswell. What is the name of that base out there? I think there is one for that. If you cross over, maybe Fort Knox is the same way, but I don't know about the Capitol, where they can hold you without charging you. I think they got to charge you.
Well, but the thing is that I don't care where you go as an American citizen, you still have the right to be represented, to have a lawyer, to know what you're being charged with. Giving the government carte blanche power to determine whether you should be held indefinitely should scare everyone.
Yeah.
Like, that should concern you.
Yeah.
As an American citizen, you are afforded certain rights, no matter how dumb the decision was. Like, if it says no trespassing, lethal force is authorized, you probably shouldn't go there.
Yeah.
But if you do, you still have certain rights, and you have the the right to be represented, have a trial. Like, you can't just you're gonna disappear to a CIA black site.
Yeah. Well, that will wrap us up for this week. And again, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about it. And again, if you would like to contribute to the podcast financially, it is greatly appreciated. If you enjoy it, if you're enjoying the content, we want to build better content. We want to make it better. Looking at some things to do. We're 97 episodes in. Like, subscribe, share, get everybody on board. Join the exchange. Put your comments in below. Let us know what you think. Let us know your ideas. And until next week, have a good week.